Please welcome onto screen Carla Watson, Catherine Wajcenberg, and Itumeleng Mothlabane.
Good morning, wonderful people. My name is Carla Watson, and I'm here to officially welcome you and open the 8th annual summit of the Jakes Gerwel Fellowship, coming live today from Johannesburg, South Africa. This is one of JGF's most collaborative and flagship products every year, and it includes our team of staff, candidate fellows, and alumni as strategic partners to deliver on this, because we believe in the power of community as a reflection of what coordination can bring together. So this year's theme is Education Reimagined, with tools, trends, and transformation. And our goal for the next 2 days with you is to collectively explore how pedagogy, leadership, and education are evolving, and how we can actively work together to create the change and shape the change that we want to see. Now, we live in the time of generative AI, which is already questioning and challenging much of our lived experiences. But the World Bank earlier this year released a report about the expected future skills, the critical skills people will need. And interestingly, there are 3 that I want to highlight to you of the 5. Innovation, motivation, and self-awareness. In fact, 70% of employers expect that their workforce will have these skills as essential and critical to their capabilities. So, today is an invitation to lean into the reflective reimagination of what education can be like, as yourself as teachers, as tools for transformation in your own settings. So the use case I'd like to share as an example of this coordinated effort is something called the Teaching at the Right Level campaign. This campaign is one of the most carefully evaluated interventions in education, because the research is showing that what works is because it's scalable and sustainable when these strategic levers are coordinated. So Ben Piper, who is the Director of Global Education at the Gates Foundation, says, as we see on the screen, structured pedagogy works. Teaching at the right level works. The evidence is clear. And in his interview earlier this year with DevVox, he also spoke about how sustainable interventions often come when you spend time with the root of the problem, the cause of the problem, the pain points, the frustrations, the constraints, and you increase your probability to develop a sustainable and scalable solution. Now, this use case of teaching at the right level also demonstrates teacher leadership in the context that they work in. So this evidenced work is in Ghana, India, Kenya, Zambia, and Nigeria. It's essentially focused on, and I want you to imagine as teachers yourselves, imagine you could group your learners at their learning level and not by their grade. This intervention shows what's possible when you take an innovative approach to some of the constraints within your context. It's one of the most carefully evaluated, most cost-effective interventions because it is improving the capabilities within foundational learning for young people. But now we know schools are complex spaces. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit now from that view. Schools are complex places with many actors and many stakeholders to deal with, because transformation or the reimagination of things doesn't come from one direction. It doesn't come top down or a specific way, because we just want the answers, right? We want somebody to tell us what to do. But real reimagination and transformation comes when there is a meeting point between the top down, so think policy, administration, and bottom up through learners, social justice, and the practice of pedagogy and what we want to see in the world. These strategies must meet. So today, our guests, coming from very different vantage points, will bring us a sense of activism and a deep expertise into pedagogy, technology, youth, and social justice. We're really honored to be joined by Catherine Wajcenberg from Brazil and Itumeleng Mothlabane from South Africa. So I'd love to bring into our conversation Catherine Wajcenberg, simply alphabetically, and we'll hear from her now. Catherine, thank you for joining us from Brazil. I believe it's very early where you are. How are you doing?
I'm great, Carla. Thank you. It's
Wonderful.
5 a.m. here, but I'm very happy to be here. Very fired up.
Well, you look great for
Thank
5
you.
a.m. Well done. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate our time together today. So I'd love to bring you into this conversation. You have 17 years of experience in teacher development and teacher training, working in inclusive pedagogy and teacher development in Brazil. And I believe that you are aiming to train 15,000 teachers in the work that you do. So my curiosity for you is, can you just bring us in a little bit into the learning context that you work in? If you can describe it a little bit for us. And also what emerging trends you might be finding or you're noticing in pedagogy and technology.
Thank you so much, Carla. I first would like to thank everyone for being here. It's a privilege to be among so many educators that believe, as I do, on the transformative power of education. And I'm very grateful to be here. And answering your question, as you mentioned, right, I am from Sao Paulo, Brazil. And well, as you may know, Brazil is a country with profound inequalities, and our public education system reflects that. Sao Paulo, where I'm based, has over 3.5 million students and over 200,000 educators in the system, in the public system. It's one of the largest public education systems in the world. So, as you can imagine, it's a system that is extremely complex. Um, our schools, they operate across an incredibly diverse range of contexts. So, from our urban centers to rural areas, we have indigenous communities, settlement regions, and even schools that work within the prison system. And they all are within the same educational system that controls one of the largest, the largest state in terms of students here in the country. So each one has its unique challenge, strengths, and cultural realities. And in terms of public policy, this is one of the main challenges that we have to implement new processes, technologies, and as you know, technology has been central in everyone's educational agenda. And São Paulo, where I'm based, has invested heavily in educational platforms, monitoring systems, and dashboards to better track and integrate students into the digital world. However, what I see is that those digital solutions, they often arrive without support, without adaptation, and without teacher voices or school realities taken into consideration. And this raises a lot of concerns when we're talking about equity and inclusion in education. One of our main concerns here is that uh, data without pedagogy becomes bureaucracy, and too often digital dashboards are used to control schools as top down information and not for educational reflection. And when teachers aren't involved in designing and the adaptation of these digital tools, they become irrelevant and just another task to be completed. And this burdens students, this burdens the teachers, and it makes no sense for them in the educational system. And when tech is deployed without infrastructure, like the devices and the connectivity that they need and the proper training that teachers need, it increases, not only reduces inequality here. So we know that teachers want to use technology to plan better, to differentiate learning, and to identify students that are in risk, in any kind of risks. But they need the support, they need time, and they need the collaboration to make this happen. But despite the challenges that we all know, and I believe that you might face similar challenges over there, is that we've seen teachers do incredible things when they are trusted and when they are supported to act on what they know. And with data in hand, teachers knew how to better tackle students' learning gaps. Schools could better track the attendance of students and significantly increase the presence of kids in school, and also helped them to prevent many situations of child labor, child neglect. And here in Brazil, you have to send your kids to school, but the system oftentimes don't have the tools to enforce the law. So schools started doing that because now they have the data to go to the justice and say, look, we have the official data here. The student is not coming to school. You have to do something about it. So this was also a great effect that we had here with the data analysis. And we saw incredible effects there on the students as well. Because once students understood the value of the data, they started to better engage in the activities. They started taking the standard exams more seriously because they understood what this could bring back to the school, like having better results would make the school more prestigious in their region. They started feeling prouder to be in their own schools. So when school leaders and teachers knew how to handle data and knew how to use this information to engage students, the results were incredible. And we know that with this information, we make teachers' pedagogical interventions more measurable and visible. So once they found that a student had some specific learning gap, they could tackle a specific that need, and in the next test, they could see if the intervention helped or if it didn't help. So for teachers, it started to be something more of a tool to help them design better strategies rather than just something that they had to do. So we have these two situations here: schools that really knew how to embrace it, and schools that don't even have the resources to start embracing it. So it's a very unequal system, as I mentioned. And I believe that some of the things that we see students engaging and the youth engaging more is that now here in São Paulo, we have a lot of student-centered programs. So they started using technology to engage students in student councils, and they have now, it's something that we call here, um, it would be like a caring student, someone that is there in the school to help you welcome the students and to welcome new students. And they have students that are responsible for the tracking of all the data from the classroom. They have once a week a meeting to discuss with all the school principals and teachers what they could do to improve the classes results. So they started working with the data with the students, and students starting uh, they started to bring some of their ideas in order to help with the results. So this helped also with teacher engagement and teacher classroom management, because sometimes they would come and say, look, we don't have great results because the teacher uh, doesn't do this or that, or they don't know how to do this. We would like to do that. So some of the schools, as you know, like 15,000 students. So I have a lot of stories, but they but they have amazing ideas. For example, in schools where teachers are older and they don't have a lot of digital literacy, they have a cyber leader in each classroom. So each student is responsible for all the technology and is the one that helps the teacher how to implement it, and is the one that helps the students that don't know how to access it. So it happens, and we have some situations here where tracking data helped us to understand better the community as well, because by understanding that there was one example very interesting. They analyzed the data of homework assignment, and they saw that there was almost 43% of their students that couldn't deliver it on time, or they wouldn't deliver it. And when they started talking to the students, they said, oh, it's because we don't have computers or internet or anything in our house. and we can only do it in the next day when we are at school. So it's always late. And then the school, just by listening to the students, they realize, look, we have to do the opposite. We have to assign it before so they can do it here with us. So listening to the students, they could understand the realities. And it's incredible what they do to bring students back to school and to make sure that they are the protagonists that they should be. And what I believe we need next in Brazil and also globally, we need to shift this view that digital uh, platforms and ed tech should be for monitoring, and they should be for pedagogical reflection and improvement. We need educational platforms that give teachers data that they understand, and also they need time to reflect, plan, and collaborate. Because here we have so many platforms that they have to create a schedule to do it. It doesn't matter if it's connected to the curricula, they have to do the test, because otherwise they don't get the results. So it starts to be an avalanche, and it's hard for schools to track and to actually analyze this data and have the time to plan and collaborate with other teachers, which would be the ideal here, right? And I think that finally we need to position teachers not as the cuters, but as the architects of all this transformation. Because if the ed tech comes to the classroom and teachers just have to assign it, it's meaningless. So they have to be able to build up something from it and not just apply it to make sure that they have the basic standards, you know. So there are great results from it, but we still have a long way to go in order to achieve what we really want. But uh, the thing is that teachers, they show up, they adapt, they ask hard questions, they listen to students, and this is the kind of work that deserves to be seen, supported, and shared. And this is something that I've been talking to all the school leaders and teachers in the course. Like, uh, if you have a team that is united and they have the same goals and they understand what they're doing and they're valued for that and they feel part of a community, soon they will start collecting the results of these actions. So I think
Sure.
I'm not sure if it answers your question. I talked a lot
Oh,
about our scenario here.
no, you definitely have answered my question, Catherine. And in your reflections, you're really showing some parallels or similarities to what some of the challenges are in the South African education system. And your point around homework reminds me of a very experienced teacher told me one day back in the day around the word homework. It assumes there's a home to be able to do work in. So when we give out homework and expect, we make this riding assumption that our students can learn and work in those environments that they come from, it's a big distance to what is actually necessary for an enabling environment for folks to do their homework in. And there was something you said that I was quite curious about, also around the role of data in helping teachers make informed decisions, which of course trickles through to the learner or the pupil or the student in front of you. What role do you think youth could have in helping teachers and the system, the big system, improve on some of the gaps in their learning processes? What role do you think the youth could have in helping to shape more positive trends in their own performance?
Wow. I think they already do all the time. And even when they are rebelling, they're also shaping. And this is something that we talk about all the time here, because some of the teachers say, oh, especially adolescents, they are not that engaged and they don't have any desires for the future. And I go like, they're challenging you. So this is, something that all the time I think that students, they are challenging, and they're also um, pushing teachers to develop new skills and to adapt lessons, and they're not always comfortable. And I think this is something that we've been talking a lot about. being a teacher is not having your lesson plan from 3 years ago being able to be used today. It cannot work today because today is completely different from 3 years ago, so, and your group is not the same group, and the technology is not the same anymore, and things are moving faster and students are moving faster, so they push a lot on their own way of engaging with schools and with technology. And also we have this great shift in our educational system to actually put students in more privileged places in their own student life. So we have more places for them to connect. We have places where they have the councils, and they have been requesting teachers to bring more. So we have some great ideas that were brought from students where they told teachers what they wanted and what they needed in order to engage. So they one example that I remembered, they were having a digital activity, and one of the students said, "Look, teacher, whenever you come to class, all the students are facing the board and you are on the front. You cannot see anyone's screen. So they're all
Fair,
just
yes.
like playing games and doing whatever. Why wouldn't you? Yeah, really. Why don't you create like a semicircle, like a moon, and then all the computers are facing the middle? So the cyber students can like look all the computers at the same time, and then the teacher was like, oh my God, he just like taught me to do the most basic thing in the world, but he was attentive. He really wanted it to work. He wanted the class to work. He wanted the class to have better results. And he knew that sitting this position would change everything. And it showed results. Like they really improved their activities. So it's from the small things to the large things like campaigns and youth movements that we have here. I think that the shifting and the challenging, I think this is how youth is always improving our education.
I like that, Catherine, and I have to agree with you as a former high school teacher. The challenging that teenagers bring you, A, is very humbling and a good reminder on there's no one more confident than a high school student when adolescent in front of you. And they often do carry the innovation and the challenges and the things that the future is asking for, never mind what we might be seen as adults. Thank you so much for that insightful response, Catherine. And you segue very nicely into our next guest, Itumeleng Mothlabane, who's going to come and join us on our screen here. Welcome, Itumeleng. Hello. And thank you for joining us today, all the way from Equal Education. I know Congress is coming up, so thank you very much. I especially appreciate the time that you're sharing with us today in the Jakes Gerwel Fellowship community. How are you doing this morning, Itumeleng?
Thank you so much, Carla, for having me. I think I'm particularly interested in the conversation that you were having with Catherine just now about the contribution of learners to pedagogy and transforming schools. As you said, we are new to Congress, and at Equal Education, that is prime time for learners to bring forth their ideas on movement building, but also their vision for their schools through a process that we do resolutions in and different processes. And so it's quite exciting to hear that this is not a unique situation to us in South Africa.
Correct, Itumeleng. And this is the insight and the wisdom that Catherine's brought us from Brazil, in the sense of not necessarily exactly the same, but there are populations sharing some of the same challenges and some of the same routes and strategies that we could consider. So, Itumeleng, you're currently the Deputy General Secretary at Equal Education, and your background bridges social justice, education, and youth leadership. So it's a great segue from Catherine earlier. And as I understand Equal Education, it's quite focused on mobilizing communities to confront systemic barriers. And in the context of education, I'd be very curious from your perspective, what learning contexts do you currently engage with? And what tools do you see teachers possibly using to reimagine youth leadership today?
Thank you so much, Carla. It's quite exciting also just for me to be speaking to people that are teachers, but are also influencers in the teaching space, because as Equal Education, we struggled to mobilize those that are employed by the Department of Education because of our standpoint with the department. So I must say that I'm quite grateful to be here today. Look, the context of South Africa is informed a lot by the inequality that we see in our schools. The inequality that we see in the country, it doesn't exempt the schools, right? Right now, we have a lot of schools. Part of our campaigns at Equal Education is overcrowding. But you would be shocked that at the same time, SAWU, that is a union representing a lot of Quintile 5 schools and private schools, are fighting that actually schools must be only 30 in a class, and above that, there can't be any admissions. So there's someone that's sitting in a class with 96 learners, and there's someone that's sitting in a class with 20 learners. And that is the reality of being a teacher in South Africa, that it is not an equal ground, but it is a ground where then a lot of us are challenged to find means in order for us to be successful in the work that we do. And I think this is the thing that they don't teach you in university, or the thing that they talk about when they tell you you're about to become a teacher, that the ground isn't the same. The word school doesn't define the same thing in our country. And I also want to talk about that there's a decline, a big decline, and this is one of the concerns of equal education, in the number of teachers that are teaching right now. The reading panel tells us that in the Eastern Cape, 58% of teachers will retire in the next 5 years. In Limpopo, 51% of teachers are going to retire in the next 5 years. In Mpumalanga, 50% of teachers are also going to retire in the next 5 years. And these are rural provinces in our country. And with then the department implementing austerity budgets, and we saw last year that in the Western Cape, they said the 2,500 posts that were open, they're going to freeze them. And so it looks like the inequality that we are seeing now is not going to end. And unfortunately, for the young teachers that are entering the system, it means that they find the system with a much bigger gap. And we were talking at Equal Education a lot about how do we then empower young teachers to be able to take up space in the management of schools? What tools can we then give to their hands? Because right now, as we're talking, Carla, in South Africa, 70% of the SMT is people at the age of 55 and above. So that is 5 years, 10 years to retirement, and that is the school management. So you know what happens when schools change management. The succession process is never clear. And so Equal Education is particularly focused on young teachers that are in university through our tertiary society programs. We only have 5 so far in the institutions of learning that are there in South Africa. One is in UJ, University of Limpopo, the University of Fort Hare. We are particularly now wanting to target institutions that normally that have learners from working class families, because that's where the need is most, to make sure that we then recruit in that institution, so that when they get into the field, they sign that contract with the Department of Education that kind of cripples their ability to interact with social movements like us. They already have that kind of empowerment of understanding the system. And we also have our anti-corruption campaign, which includes a lot of work with school governing bodies, because one of the things that we've realized through our research at Equal Education is that there is a strained relationship between the people that are in the senior management teams, the teachers, and the actual school governing body. And through this campaign, we wanted to clarify what is everyone's job, so that as people lead these schools and they lead transformation inside schools, everyone is able to hold on to what they can do best. But also, Equal Education has a beautiful document that is the Education Charter. In that document, Equal Education members dream together of what a school looks like. And when you open, the very thing that we say is that education is a public good that needs to be accessible to everyone as the best quality possible. Right. And then this argues that this idea of a system where one teacher, on the other hand, is holding 96 learners and the other teacher is holding 20 learners is not the ideal situation of where we want to be as a country. But secondly, we also imagine a pedagogy that takes into account the indigenous ways of learning in our country, because we see a lot of dropout rate, particularly in grade 9, grade 10, and grade 11 in our schools, because the curriculum in a lot of times isn't as inclusive as it needs to be, and therefore loses other learners in the process. And that's why, as Equal Education, we're saying, can we look at a decolonized way of teaching? What that looks like, we will have to define it together with learners, with teachers, with communities, with unions and different stakeholders that are part of the schooling community. But we can no longer afford in 2025 to get rid of the ways of learning that we are using in our homes and to not be able to transfer them to schools. We are now doing the reading campaign, Carla, and a lot of teachers will tell you cheekily that actually reading doesn't start in the classroom, it starts at home. And that's why I particularly like that comment of what is a home? Who is in that home? Are they able to facilitate reading? Because there is also a difference in the way that a home makeup is. And lastly, I didn't want to start with this, but I also think that we have a big role in holding our government accountable. Catherine was speaking now about their transformation in Brazil. And last year at the reading panel, we had Eva Gomez, who is a mayor in Brazil, who was talking to us about the role of local government in making sure that schools are improved and that they're transformed. And local government was an integral part in the transformation of literacy in Brazil, right? And so in our country, we have a local government that doesn't get involved at all in education, right? The only thing that they do is to provide water, which sometimes they will tell you that I'm not accountable for this. And therefore, we need to be able to make sure that all three layers of government understand clearly their role. Because if you have a role to a community, there is absolutely no way you can never have a role to an education in that particular community, especially when at every crisis, right, everyone is going to point to education, that if the schools aren't functional, then the society will not be functional. And also last year, I also wanted to cite the example of Peru, which is one of the comrades that were part of the reading panel last year, who are also telling us about some of the changes that government needed to implement in order for them to be able to transform education. And a lot of times when we protest, when we go in the streets, when we occupy government offices, we are seen as the ones that are being extra radical, right? And not wanting to collaborate. But it's because we understand the moral responsibility that government has in making sure that we reimagine what our schools look like. And with the lack of political will in our country, comrades, we ought to all stand up. And as I finish, I want to talk about the role of teachers in what is now dying, right, which is the unions. In a lot of times, young teachers don't want to be part of unions. If I didn't have the kind of political education that I have now, Carla, even me, I'd stay away. Because that thing isn't sexy anymore, isn't providing, isn't talking to the needs of the people, and isn't providing direction. But how will it provide direction if we don't give it the direction that it needs? And therefore, that's why I'm saying that as teachers, we need to find spaces to organize ourselves. JGF is an example of one space where teachers gather, we talk about our issues, but we need to also find resolutions that go to the teachers that don't have access to this space. Because one of the things I always say is that a teacher in a quintile 5 school that teaches in a class with 30 learners still has a responsibility to the teacher that is in a quintile 1 school that is without water. And your responsibility is solidarity, because the privilege that you get from being part of that school gives you at least a better voice to be heard in particular spaces that a teacher in a quintile 1 space wouldn't be able to have, right? A teacher in a quintile 1 space is not in Johannesburg. They are in the deep rurals of Notu. They have not been paid for 3 months. They are protesting as we speak. There are learners that are still writing matric exams because teachers in Notu had not been paid for 3 months, and they started protesting, and unfortunately they use the learners to protest, and so some of the learners weren't able to write matriculants. So the teachers that then have the spaces like this have the responsibility to speak for those that aren't able to access. I've already spoken a bit about unions, but comrades, we ought to transform the union spaces, and I know fixing it from the inside sometimes doesn't work, but in this case, it means that you're able to then organize ourselves, be available leadership to be that steward for the school. It's the little things. Be available to mentor the RCL, because you're mentoring leadership, you're harboring ideas from the young people. Be available to go and volunteer to sit in the SGB meetings, because you're then shaping what becomes of the governance of that particular school. And then the last thing is we are building this side. Equal Education is excited to talk to teachers, school principals, and everyone that's part of the schooling community in ways that help us transform. Because one of the issues that we faced in the past is teachers being threatened, and we can't run away from the fact that it will be uncomfortable to be part of a social movement when you're employed by the very government that we are trying to transform. But which uncomfortability do you choose? Sitting in a school that does not have sanitation, that does not have access to water, that you know that your peers are in classrooms where they don't have the right LTSM. So we as a generation, particularly the young teachers, need to choose to move differently. And Carla, to credit everyone, this is not something that's not already happening. I think we are seeing a different generation of teachers that's coming into schools using different technology to bring in the right pedagogy. They're using current trends. They're using fun things. And I want to say we can still use these tools in order for us to then reimagine what transformation of governing these schools look like, and how we then get involved as young people. The 70% of the SMT, I can almost assure you that in the next 10 years, that's not what it will look like. So how do we then occupy those HOD positions, deputy principal positions? How do we empower ourselves and make sure that we are part of formations that are advocating against things like austerity, so that when these posts go out, they're not frozen, but rather there is employment that continues. And so in the end, I basically just want to say that we have a duty to each other. And we also then have a duty to the one stakeholder that all of us are serving, which is the learners. And we cannot exist in islands. We need to exist in organizations, and we need to exist in community, and we need to exist as part of something bigger that is fighting for a better transformation. All of these tools only work when we are working with each other. And Carla.
Sure, Itumeleng, thank you. And I'm hearing quite a lot of symmetry between yourself and Catherine's presentations today around some of the tools that are available to the education sector. And you're coming very strongly through the role of government, specifically local government, and teachers, their age and their capabilities to move with some of the changes and challenges that youth are presenting. And I wonder if it's possible to bring Catherine onto the screen at the moment, because I'd like to pose a question to both of you. And it's a little bit cheeky, but I want you to kind of lean into the reimagination component of the theme of Summit. And You're both speaking very clearly around available tools, available trends that you're noticing from your areas of expertise. But if you had a magic wand in your own context, and this magic wand is a very powerful magic wand, what is education reimagined for you? And I'll start with you, Catherine, and then we'll come back to Itumeleng.
Oh, that's hard to answer in just a few minutes, but but I
Give
believe
it your
that
best shot. You got it.
yeah, if I had a magic wand, it would be a system where all students from all economic backgrounds and regions would have the same kind of access, and they would have the same resources and individual tutors, and they would have places where students could be heard, and they would be able to build their own pathways throughout education. They could follow their own interests, and they could develop their abilities according to the challenges that they would have to face throughout school, but with the support of the social emotional background and considering their families, their realities, their culture, and obviously all the material would be adapted magically to their own immediate reality, considering their cities and their indigenous backgrounds, and it would be something incredible. You would just like touch and it would be specifically to you. As we're talking about magic, it would be
We
something like
are.
this.
We're reimagining what's possible.
Yeah.
In the innovation process, the only way we can drive a type of change is once we can maybe imagine it to bring it into life. So I hear a strong sense of inclusivity, a strong sense of adaptive curriculum to meet where the learner is and where the learner needs to be in terms of their progression, and a more equitable approach to the education system. I hope this isn't too far into the future, because this feels a bit like a no-brainer in terms of what the education system can offer. But the role of teachers, as with JGF's work, is wanting to enhance and develop this reimagined space of what we want to see in our classrooms across South Africa. So Itumeleng, if you had this very large, amazing ability, this magic wand, this ability to be able to reimagine education, what would that mean for you?
It means a lot of things. I mean, I'll definitely pull from Equal Education's Education Charter that speaks about a decolonized education and an education that is a public good, that is of quality, because that is quite important to us. The education that we have now, we've been able to access, but the quality is questioned. But look, from my own words, I think an education that responds to the needs of the people and is able to help those that come of it to transform themselves, but also to transform the communities in which that they are part of. An education that brings, that doesn't shy away from the indigenous knowledges of the people, right? That empowers homes and also communities, but also an education that everyone has a sense of ownership of, right? And not a foreign concept that we go to and then we leave behind in school holidays and then we go to again. You know, I think education should be a continuous process that is also inclined to who we are and strengthens our identity as a people and as a country.
Wow. Thank you, Itumeleng and Catherine, and a huge thanks for your time and sharing your insights with us today. We are more similar than we realize in our different contexts, even if we feel very unique and on our own in that space. So thank you so much. So thank you, Catherine and Itumeleng, for joining the 8th Annual Summit at the Jakes Gerwel Fellowship. And what's become strongly apparent here is that when we speak about tools and trends in education for transformation, it actually can land within the people that are within that system, and the same people that might challenge the system or want to build a movement towards seeing a reimagined future. And what we have to keep in mind as we experience the next few days, the next 2 days together, is that the different tools and trends and components of our time in the different sessions, from AI through to learning with play, are components to embed within ourselves as teachers to be able to improve and enhance the work and the vision that we have for the education system that we want to change. So our guests have shown us that we are not just participants. So as a teacher, one teacher to another, we are not participants of the education system. We're not only participants, but we are co-creators of the change that we want to see. And in the next 2 days, we'll have innovations that are worth adapting to. You'll be exposed to techniques that are worth practicing, and you'll experience proven strategies that can elevate your pedagogy and the learning outcomes. So folks, I invite you to step into your power as attendees of the Jakes Gerwel Fellowship 8th Annual Summit this year. I want to invite your agency, and I want you to use the tools of reflection for context-informed pedagogy so that we can build towards this coordinated community that Itumeleng and Catherine have shared with us to reimagine the education system that we want to serve. Thank you.